MC for tonight. You can also see on your screen is David Adler, and we are waiting for our guest, Amichai Chikli, MK, who we will introduce shortly. He did say he might be a little late, so we're not quite sure when he's going to arrive. For anybody new to our Zoom sessions, our usual format is that we check with our guest for about 30 or 40 minutes, after which we open up to questions from the audience. If you do want to ask a question, you need to let us know by raising your hand electronically, and there's an icon down the bottom called reaction. You click that and then you'll find the raise hand icon. Written questions can be placed on the chat function, and we will read out some of these in between the spoken ones. But we do have a lot to cover tonight, so apologies in advance if question time is a little shorter than usual. Now, I don't think we haven't got Amichai yet, David?
Haven't seen him.
Okay. Perhaps shall we play the video?
For sure. Here we go.
What we're going to do is play a little video just while we wait for him. This is with Amichai Chikli, and it just gives you a little bit of background as to what he's all about. So this will go for about 4 minutes. Hopefully by then he'll be with us.
Now, the next government, if it is voted in, will have a razor-thin majority of 61 seats in the 120-seat Knesset. It could have had 62, but last month, Yamina Knesset member Amichai Chikli broke party ranks and said he would not sit in a coalition with the left-wing Meretz party, saying it would be a betrayal of Yamina's voters. That's generated much speculation about Chikli's future, starting with whether he'll vote for, against, or abstain in that vote to approve a Bennett-led government. And joining us in studio is current member of the Yamina party for Parliament, Amichai Chikli. So, Amichai, maybe help us with the suspense. First of all, reports you may be weighing whether to change your mind. Can you tell us how you're going to vote in that vote on the government? And then what will your position be if that new government comes into power?
Yeah, so first of all, I will oppose this government.
Okay.
Yamina was very clear during the election period about its approach towards the government. We said clearly we're going to establish a right-wing government, and we're not going to let Lapid to be the prime minister. Through the lenses of ideology, this is a progressive government that is now being established, and I don't want these forces to be enforced with votes from Yamina voters. So I will oppose this government. And about my personal political future, well, that's there are some sanctions. If I will oppose, I can be a rebellion MK, which means I could not run in an party in the next election. That's the meaning.
Let me ask you, one of your fellow Yamina parliament members, Nir Orbach, also had hesitations. It looks like he will vote to the government. But he did say that if he opposes the government, he will resign from the party and just let whoever the next in line take its place, because he feels he owes that to Naftali Bennett. Don't you feel you owe Naftali Bennett some degree of loyalty, at least to just resign from the party?
So I owe Naftali Bennett respect, but I think it's I brought all my reputation and all my energy to this campaign, and I supported Naftali Bennett because of his ideas and his ideology. That's not my first time. That's actually my second time. Was also in Yamin Hadash. I see Yamina as the parallel to Meretz. It should be from the right to the Likud in terms of economy, security, and other issues. That's right-wing party, and therefore, I think...
David, I think Amichai is ready to... here he is.
Okay.
50%.
I'm trying to... Okay.
Okay, do we have you, Amichai?
Hello, Alan. Shalom.
Welcome. Welcome to Australia.
Australian Jewish Association.
Okay,
good to be with
thank you. Thank you. Let me just do a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll get started. Here in the diaspora, we watched with some concern as Israel went through 1, 2, 3 and then 4 elections before a government was finally formed. But as it turned out, Naftali Bennett, the leader of Yamina, who is known for his right-wing views, ended up being Prime Minister of a left-wing government. I suppose we could say only in Israel could this happen, but one of Yamina's members of the Knesset wasn't happy about the compromises being asked of him, and rather than just go along with the party's surrender of its right-wing values to keep the coalition happy, decided to stand up for what he believes in. That man was Amichai Chikli, a 40-year-old family man who is now being labelled a renegade, or even, quote, a virus in the Knesset. It all came to a head about a month ago when Amichai voted against the budget. And although the budget was passed, which avoided a 5th election, a lot of acrimony remains within Yamina and the right-wing parties. These days, it is hard to find a politician anywhere who is not afraid to stand up to the left, and we say kol hakavod to him. So to tell us what's going on with the Israeli government, he joins us now. A little late, but at least we've got him. Amichai Chikli, welcome to Australia via Zoom, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Amichai, I would like to start with a couple of specific issues, and then we'll talk about your views more generally. So
Sure.
What was the problem? What was the issue with the budget, and why did you vote against it?
Okay, so it got nothing to do with the budget himself. It is more about the government. Voting for the budget is voting for the government. That's one. Second, if you want to speak about the budget specifically, there's a big problem with the budget concerning the budget that goes to the Arab society. I am for budget to Arab society. I am for advancing and promoting infrastructures, education, and everything that the Arab society in Israel needs, and obviously to treat them as equal in terms of civil rights. But the situation is that the Arab list in the coalition named Ra'am, which is related to the Muslim Brotherhood, they have tremendous power and impact on the budget. We are speaking about around 50 billion shekels, and the money is they've managed to place their own people in the inner organization that runs the budget. It's called the Rashut Lepitua Chevra Aravit, the organization to develop the Arab society. So Ram placed their own people there. And that's a big problem, because I'm afraid and concerned that the money will be used to education and education to radical Islamism and Palestinian nationalism. And that's the ideology of Ram. And therefore, it is very, very likely that we will see Islamist education and Palestine nationalism promoting in schools, in afternoon activities, in summer camps, in the mosques, and in 5 years or 6 years from now, this party, which is now 6 mandates, they will have 10 mandates or 11 mandates. And then we will be in a huge problem with the Arab society. And by the way, if you go back to the 70s, at Gaza Strip, there was no border with Gaza. Gaza was part of Israel. And Israel thought that it would be a good idea to invest money in the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza. 10 years later, Hamas as a terror organization was established. I don't think we should go in the same path today.
Yes. Now, the Citizenship Bill is another controversial issue. Now, that was presented to the Parliament in July, and if I understand it correctly, it was designed to oppose the naturalization of Palestinian Arabs who married Israelis. And you voted against this bill and against your party, for which you were roundly criticised. What was your problem with this bill, and where does it stand now?
Okay, so there were two major problems. One, it wasn't just this bill. They connected the bill to what we call that Sa'at Emun. Do you trust or do not trust the government? So voting for the bill would also mean to vote trust in the government. First. Second, there was a intense negotiation with Ra'am and Meretz party in the middle of the night, and they have an agreement. But the agreement was not exposed to the parliament. No one had a paper that says what exactly is the decision around the bill. What are the compromises that were made? What are the differences between the bill as it stands originally and what we have after the negotiation throughout the night? And therefore, I think as a parliament member, it's inconceivable to vote for a bill that none of the Knesset members have read the actual bill, because the actual bill is after the night negotiation with Ram and Meretz. And when it was canceled, it was very interesting to read what Esawi Fridge, a minister from Meretz party, said on Twitter. He said, we had an agreement to authorize around 4,000 Palestinians with no status in Israel, and that's a pity that we have failed with this bill. I hope that this bill will come again naturally without any deals with Ram and Meretz, and I will vote for the bill 100%.
Yes, and would the bill in that form, would that still be essentially the same as where it started?
We don't know.
Philosophical problem?
No, normally the bill is okay. It's not perfect. We need a stronger bill. We call it Chok Yesod, foundation bill. There's a higher level of bills. So I think we are trying to promote, me, Simcha Rotman, other Knesset members, we're trying to promote a better bill that deals with immigration policy of Israel generally. Right. But right. It won't happen now. So now we do need to vote for the citizenship bill, but Knesset members must have a paper, understand exactly what it means, and not to do a negotiation throughout the night that no one's know what are they voting for.
Right. So it was really a matter of process that was the problem.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. You have said that a party that wins only 6 seats shouldn't take the PM's office, and the problem with having a minority party in charge is obvious. But and we're seeing, I guess, how it's difficult to function. But is the current situation better than having someone from the left as prime minister?
Okay, so I don't think that the alternative is a prime minister from the left. And I think we have two big precedents that are bothering me.
Precedents.
How do you say it exactly?
Precedents.
Precedents, sorry. Yeah, so we have two precedents that are bothering me. First, the democratic one. It is immoral and undemocratic to be prime minister with less than 10 mandates. That's a quote of Naftali Bennett. I totally agree with Naftali Bennett, because in the future, we will have a smaller party, and they will say, oh, without us, you cannot form a government, so let me be the prime minister. It is nuts. And I'm not aware of any other state on earth that such a process has been made. And you might inform me, but I think it's really, it is immoral, it is undemocratic, and it is very, very dangerous. That's one. And second is, for the first time in Israel, we have a government and a coalition with major post-Zionist and anti-Zionist party who are shaping the ship that is called Israel. And I think that's a unique situation. It has never been this way before, and it is very, very dangerous.
Yes, I'll ask you about that in a moment, but you have described the current government as Chamberlain-like, in other words, resembling the foolishness of Neville Chamberlain in thinking he had achieved peace by negotiating with the Nazis. How do you see a comparison with that and the current government?
Okay, so the truth is that Bennett, in his views, is not far away from Netanyahu. He doesn't have that much of a different philosophy. And I'm not those one who says, okay, he formed this government, so from now on he's a leftist and that's it, and we all hate him, blah, blah, blah. That's immature. That's not the real problem. The real problem is that the world is not foolish, and he understands very well that there is no public behind Bennett, and therefore he is weak. If he is weak in Israel, he is weak abroad. That's the problem. We do not have the luxury to have a weak prime minister.
Yeah.
So he can be a right-wing leader, but without the moral power that comes from the public, he doesn't have any power on the geopolitical atmosphere. And we can see now how the Emirates and Saudi Arabia are trying to negotiate with Iran and to compromise with Iran. And we had a very strong line of Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and Israel with Netanyahu on roll. And now we can see that this alliance, and also obviously Biden administration, the naive Biden administration, is very helping towards Iran agenda. And maybe we can speak about Chamberlain, about the policy of America. That's not Naftali Bennett policy,
No,
but it is not strong enough to have a Churchill, let's say, kind of diplomacy.
Yes, we'll get to America in a moment. Just on some Israeli politics, I'll throw a few names at you, and maybe just give me a comment or so.
Sure, with
Yair
pleasure.
Lapid as foreign minister.
Is not professional, is not a professional diplomat, is not eloquent, it doesn't know enough of history. His speech about anti-Semitism was a complete disaster, saying that the conflict between the Hutu and the Tutsi in Rwanda is a form of anti-Semitism. This is absolutely ridiculous. We are trying for decades to explain the world the singularity, the uniqueness of anti-Semitism. And how can we fight anti-Semitism if we undermine the definition of the term? And I think that's a very, very wrong speech. And we have now a huge debate about anti-Semitism. We have the IHRA organization mentioning that anti-Semitism is also to deny the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. And if anti-Semitism is everything, so you cannot win the debate. And we are also fighting on the idea sphere. And therefore, I think that unfortunately, Lapid is a weak foreign minister that comes with a progressive approach and not a Zionist firm approach that we need in those days.
Yes, you did mention Ra'am, which to us in the diaspora is very strange, having an Islamist component of the party. What about Mansour Abbas? How would you rate him?
Okay, so first of all, I think he's one of the wisest men on the Knesset, and he's very, very sophisticated. He's a very nice person on the one-on-one experience. He's very moderate himself in his words, and he was very successful in creating an image of tolerance. But unfortunately, behind the image of tolerance, there is absolute intolerance and radical Islamist ideology that is behind this party. This party is led by the Shura, which is an organization of sheikhs. It's like a religious organization, is the one who takes the decision for our party, even when it comes to voting on cannabis issues. So this is an absolute religious party, anti-Zionist, and very, very dangerous.
Yes, Avigdor Lieberman. Now, he would be probably fairly right-wing in his views, but he seems to have a lot of problems with getting on with other right-leaning parties. What's the state of him at the moment? Okay, so my opinion, only mine. First, this government was formed after demonstrations about corruption, etc., etc. The most significant, the biggest corruption affair in Israel in the past decade is related to Israel Beitenu party and the secretary of the party that was sentenced to 10 years in prison for bribery and other issues. So I don't see how a head of a party can be totally not connected to this event, to these allegations, and I think it is very, very problematic. That's one. Second, I don't see him as a right-wing leader. The moment you prefer to sit with Ayman Odeh and the Joint List, Radical Palestinian Party, or Ram, only because you have personal issues with Benjamin Netanyahu, I think that's irresponsibility on the national sphere in the highest way possible. I think it is very, very bad that these bad relationships between leaders had formed this government, and Lieberman is one of the biggest person who is responsible for it. Yes. Yes, now we have mentioned former Prime Minister Netanyahu a little, and he clearly has a lot of opponents within Israel, but there is no denying that he opened up Israel to the world and formed alliances with countries that would have been unheard of only a decade ago. But you said that the toppling of Netanyahu was not just about him, but needs to be seen in the larger context of Donald Trump's loss. What did you mean by that? Okay, I think that there is a world war of ideas today between conservatives and progressive. And the defeat of the Republican Party in America is bad for Zionism, is bad for nation states all around the world. And I think that if Netanyahu would have been replaced in a democratic, normal way, it was one thing. But it was, we got into this situation based on this protest of the black flags, of the far left, of the progressive left. And this government is a victory of the progressive left and the black flags. And they have a very specific agenda which got nothing to do with Benjamin Netanyahu. They are against nation states. They are against a Jewish state. And that's the way I see it. And when I said to Ayelet Shaked and I said to Naftali Bennett, do you understand the bigger picture? To take down Netanyahu in a non-natural way is a victory for forces who are bad for the state of Israel. It is bad for our war with Iran. It is bad for our standing against the Palestinians. And so what happened? It is far more bigger than just Netanyahu, yes or no. And I guess Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked didn't agree with you. They were happy. Ayelet Shaked, I think from what I've understood, agreed with me. She understood. She didn't have the guts to say no. That's Ayelet Shaked. Naftali Bennett says, oh,
I asked him about specific books. Have you read this one? This one? Do you see what I'm talking about? He said, no, I don't care about these books. They're not important.
Okay. Now, shortly after Israel finally got this government sworn in, we saw Hamas escalate the violence, which resulted in Operation Guardian of the Walls. What did you think, firstly, about the timing of this, and how was it handled by the Bennett government?
Okay, so first, it was not in Bennett government, it was in Bibi's government. That's to be very clear, Shomer HaChomot, the guardian of the wall. The timing, so there was a debate about the neighborhood in Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah, and then the Hamas on Jerusalem Day was firing missiles. And as we saw in the past, and mainly on 2000, we saw an Arab riots, which is connected to the war with Hamas. On 2000, the reaction of Barak government was extremely aggressive, okay? And around 12 Arab citizens who were involved in the riots were killed. And then we saw about 20 years of silence from the Arabs in terms of trying to take part in a war against Israel. But because of progressive agenda that entered the police, that entered the judicial system and the IDF, we saw a very, very problematic paradigm about how the police have dealt with this issue. When the head of the police is saying, our mission is to bring back the order, and we must make sure that on both sides we get everyone will be calmed. We have a major problem. What happened in Israel on May got nothing to do about a public order. That's not just a demonstration. We are speaking about lynch, murdering of innocent people, burning up hotels. This is to take part in a war against Israel, and that's how it should be treated. And there are and both sides. It is one side that is against us. So that was very problematic. And the big problem is that a week after these riots, what we saw is a government that is being formed with a party that is basically supporting these kind of riots. And the message for the Arabs, we are now on top, we have a power, it was okay to commit these crimes, it was okay to go against the citizens of Israel. And I think it is a very wrong message that will 400% bring us into a wider and far more violent escalation with Israeli Arabs citizens.
Yes, and we saw Hezbollah have also started firing missiles into Israel over the past few months. So I imagine you see this as a connection with the way the Bennett, or with the messages the Bennett government is sending out.
I think that Israel is now weaker than it was half a year ago. I think we are in a dangerous situation. And so I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the United States. How do you see relations between Israel and the Biden administration right now?
Okay, so first of all, I think that Biden himself is not the problem, but the entire the staff that surrounds Biden and the atmosphere of the progressive dominant part in the Democratic Party, that's the biggest concern that I have. And unfortunately, the progressives in Biden administration and his party are they have a big impact. And it seems that as for now, it seems that they are very decisive in establishing a consulate in the heart of Jerusalem for the Palestinians, and they are very not determined to fight the nuclear program of Iran.
And yes, and Bennett is saying that they will not get this consulate in Jerusalem. What do you think will happen?
He's saying that Yair Lapid will replace him, and then they will have the consulate.
And what about the squad? You know, sometimes us in the diaspora, we worry more about what's happening around the world than Israelis do. How do you view the squad and what they're saying?
So first, I'm well informed about the squad. The biggest problem with the squad, that it represents a dominant power all across the campuses of America in the universities. And we know that from these universities will come the diplomats and the politicians of 10 and 20 years ahead.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with the squad. And when you go to the ideology of the squad, it is pure anti-Semitism, hatred to Israel, and it is very, very dangerous to see this anti-Semitism getting stronger in America. And by the way, it's amazing to see how it's the progressive made it's some sort of a box of ideas that goes together. You need to support Black Lives Matters, and I just saw a movie, half-an-hour movie on Netflix, which was insane. It was To a Decent Stranger, and it was absolutely against white people. Basically, if you watch this movie, you believe that every white policeman is basically a Nazi.
Yeah.
And it was, I said, I cannot believe it. It is like Goebbels, but against white people. Just amazing how radical this ideology is. And it goes the same for the Jews, who always find themselves as responsible for everything that is wrong and everything that is bad on earth.
Yes, absolutely. So what did you think of the way the US handled its exit from Afghanistan? And was any of that a worry for Israel?
Obviously, I think this is one of the most important events in the past year, and maybe more. Look, the allies of Israel and the allies of America in the Middle East, they saw what happened in Afghanistan, and you know, they're doing their calculations. So we see this superpower, America, after 20 years, in a very interesting date, was I think also in September, basically withdrawing from Afghanistan in a very not responsible way, leaving behind huge amounts of extremely expensive weapons, and abandoning their their partners, their allies in Afghanistan. They said that the army of Afghanistan is okay, and he will handle the situation, and we saw a total collapse. And I think it was a very, very problematic event, and Saudi Arabia saw it, Hezbollah saw it, the UAE saw it, Israel saw it, and I think that unfortunately, the world today can less depend on US and US Army to help them to protect their interest. And that's also, we see what's going on now in Ukraine. And if I was now in the Ukraine government, I would be very, very much concerned. I'm not sure that America would go help Ukraine in a very, if they will be invaded. I don't think that's going to happen.
You don't? You think that? Do you think that that Russia will respond to American pressure?
I'm saying that I'm very skeptical about the abilities of this specific government of America to create effective to take effective steps in order to protect our allies.
Now, we've spoken about the anti-Semitism and the anti-Zionism, which is largely driven by the so-called progressives and politics and the media. And organisations such as ours, we're constantly fighting to have the truth presented to the Australian public. Do you think that our side of politics is getting our messages through well enough? Could it be better?
It is hard for me to say about what's going on abroad because I'm in Australia, because I'm not informed enough.
Okay. No, fair enough. So the thing that worries me is when we see words such as occupation and settlements. I just wish that those words wouldn't be used. Do you think Israel's doing enough to not have those words used?
Not at all, because there is a huge debate, and that's one of the biggest problem we have. Unlike the Palestinians, they do have disagreement, but they don't have any disagreement about being right, and that's their own land, the entire land from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We don't have this same unity in the justification of the Zionist movement generally, and specifically our right all over the land of Israel, the moral right and the historic right. It doesn't mean that we need to govern every single part, and we can do negotiation, when we can do compromises, that's okay. But we have the moral right and the historical right on the land. And unfortunately, because of very deep processes within Israeli society in the past 70 years, those parts of Israel who got more and more, they got more and more away from Jewish identity. Yeah. So they become more and more, I would say, not connected, unaffiliated to Judea and Samaria. Yes. They are saying, oh, for us, it's abroad. It's abroad. What do we have to do in Hebron? What do we have to do in Judea or in Samaria? It got nothing to do with us. And also, you mentioned Lapid before. The holiest place for Jews is the Kotel and not Temple Mount. Come on. True. Yes. We know that there's a mosque in Temple Mount, and it is also a religious site of the Muslims, and we have no intentions to harm them. But from saying that and to say that that's not the holiest place for Jews, that's I think a confusion. It's confusion. We don't understand. Confusion. This is basic history. Very, very basic.
Well, this is what they're trying to do, and is rewrite history, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm saying it is very hard to fight this war when you have significant parts of Israeli society who are uninformed, or they do not want to be informed about their Jewish roots, Jewish history. You cannot have a strong position on these issues without being connected to Jewish history, recent history, and
absolutely. We'll take some questions in a moment. Just before we do, I want to mention that if you're listening to this on J-Air, this is a live simulcast of the Australian Jewish Association Zoom event, which we have every Wednesday night. Our guest tonight is Amichai Chikli, member of Knesset, and we are discussing how he is standing firm on his left-wing principles within the Israeli government and the effect it is having. Now, just at this point, we'll go to David, who will explain what we're doing next week, and then we'll come back with a couple more questions. David?
Okay, thank you very much, Alan, and thank you very much, Amichai, for your words so far. We'll try to pin you down with some further questions in a moment. But just to show people what's happening next week, we have the founder of NGO Monitor, and the topic which we'll be discussing is challenging the anti-Israel NGOs. NGO Monitor does tremendous work in looking at the networks and the money trails of certain organisations, and we will be also looking at some of the Jewish organisations such as NIF, J Street, B'Tselem and others that we say are actually doing a lot of damage to the state of Israel and to Jewish identity generally. And finally, as I always do, at the end of this session, if you're not yet doing these three things, please go to the HAA website, apply for membership or make a contribution. You can join the email list at jewishassociation.org.au, and of course, like and follow our Facebook page where the news and views items are updated usually multiple times per day.
Okay,
so
thanks.
I'd like to kick off, Alan, if
Yes.
I may. Looking at our topic next week, do you have any comment to make about the Jewish NGOs that I've mentioned, such as New Israel Fund, J Street, B'Tselem, you could add Jewish Voices for Peace and others? Is our assessment that they're quite damaging correct?
Okay, so first, that's a very important topic, and I'm very much informed and trying to promote these organizations and to fight those who are against us. Specifically, NGO Monitor is one of the most important organizations because they are doing very deep research on each and every progressive pro-Palestinian organizations that operates in Israel, and they go and research exactly where is the money coming from. And they also can give you information when you have some cover organizations. For mention, one of them is Bread for the World. So when you see an organization, Bread for the World, you say, okay, that sounds very nice. Bread for the World, who is against Bread for the World? But when you go behind the scene, you can see that's, and I could see it only because of their work, is that you have German state that is standing and funding these organizations. So Germany, they don't want to show how exactly are they spending their money in order to shape the future of the situation in Judea and Samaria, and also inner process within Israel society with organizations like Standing Together, leftist progressive organizations funded by Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, and NGO Monitor is doing a great job on this issue. The biggest problem we have is that the Zionist organization in Israel, none of them is funded by states. And when you go to the progressive pro-Palestinian organizations, they don't need any private donors. They have the EU, they have Germany, they have Switzerland, Sweden, and also more friendly states like Great Britain and other.
Thanks, Amichai. Okay, I've got Michael. Please unmute yourself, Michael, and then we've got Ron, and we'll take a couple of written questions after that. So, Michael, fire away.
Michael.
Heard.
Yeah.
Michael.
Okay, now you can hear me?
Yep.
Amichai, you're a breath of fresh air to listen to. I wish there were more like you.
Thanks so much.
It was a real pleasure listening to you. On the issue of Palestinian terrorism, how is the Rum Party, an Islamist organization that is part of the coalition, responding? And what do they say about the pay for slay programs, something we at the AGA have been successful in trying to fight here in Australia?
They say nothing about Palestinian terrorism. And if you push them, they will say on Twitter in Hebrew, not in Arabic, that they are against any form of violence, which is very foggy. They're not against Palestinian terrorism, unfortunately. And they don't deal with the issues of the Palestinian Authority giving money for the terrorists. They couldn't care less about it, and their motivation eventually is pro-Palestinian. They are for the Palestinian resistance, especially in East Jerusalem, Temple Mount. This is one of the most dominant issues in Ram Party, Al-Aqsa, Temple Mount, and they are very, very religious and extremist when it comes to these issues. So
yes,
what
do you think will happen with them, Amichai? Do you see them growing, or is this just a little blip, perhaps?
The question is the first, will we have a military major operation in Gaza or Lebanon in the near future? If yes, it is likely that this party won't stay in the coalition. That's one option. And if this government will stick, and they will have the ability to go from village to village, to cut, how do you say when you cut the rope to open a new, I don't know.
Yes, an opening ceremony.
Oh, if they will be in every opening ceremony of a court for football and playgrounds, etc., in Arab villages, they will have huge, huge power in the next election.
Okay, Ron, please unmute yourself and ask your question. No, you're still muted, Ron. No, you're right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, Amichai. I'd like to ask you a question. I understand that the basic law, which is Israel's constitution, does not allow for an anti-Zionist party to rule Israel. How do you have the Declaration of State of Israel as a Zionist state, and you have an anti-Zionist faction in the government? How is this legal? To me, it doesn't sound logical.
Yeah. The answer is Aaron Barak. And to be more widely speaking, the judicial system since 1992 has created a situation in which, based on the bill, Kvod Ha'adam V'Chiruto, the dignity of man and his freedom, they managed to create a revolution. They call it the Judicial Revolution or the Institutional Revolution. So although no one knew back at the time that they are forming a constitution, that was what Aharon Barak has decided. And what happened next is that they said, look, there is no balance between the authorities. The judicial authority is on top of the parliament, is on top of the government. And although Knesset assembly that deals with this kind of list was gathered, and there was a coalition of the Zionist party that says we should take the radical list of Balad, the most radical list, Arab list, away from the Knesset. It eventually came to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, we do not accept your decision, and they will stay. And it happened several times. And for the moment, we as parliament member don't have the legal power to overturn Bagatz, the Supreme Court decision, because of this revolution that was made by the constitutional revolution of Aaron Barak.
Yeah. Okay, Robert Gregory is our public affairs officer. Now, Robert, you've got a couple of questions that appeared on the chat, so fire away.
We've got a few questions. Thanks, Amichai. So the first question, should the Jewish leadership in Australia be talking about a two-state solution? Because that's what we hear a lot of now. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so it is a big question. My agenda is, look, we and the Palestinians, it's like oil and water. Oil and water. It does not go together. So there must be separation and some sort of Palestinian autonomy. It is very difficult to negotiate and to have business with the Palestinians currently, because their view is total. We want everything from the river to the sea, and we want the entire. So there is no one to negotiate with. But I think what we have to do is to shape the reality on the ground, and to avoid from ruling the areas where you have a huge Palestinian population. I think it is wrong for Israel to rule, let's say, Nablus, Jenin, okay, etc. But on the other hand, we must strengthen the Jewish villages in, for instance, Bik'at HaYarden, Judea, Gush Adumim, Gush Etzion. These areas where you have strong Jewish presence must be fortified. And my philosophy is basically says we cannot afford only the shore as the main popularized zone of the state of Israel.
Coast,
we also need the coast, the shore, yeah. So we also need the valley of the Jordan Valley, the entire Jordan Valley. We cannot afford a situation where Palestinians can dominate this area. And I don't believe in the idea of military that is ruling the area. We need people. We need villages. We need stronger Bet She'an. We need stronger Jordan Valley. We need stronger Eli. We need stronger Ariel. That's what, and stronger Gush Etzion. That's what we need. And we don't need to place new settlements in remote areas where it would be very hard to keep them.
Yes. Anything more, Robert?
Sure. Just another one. So, will Yair Lapid end up being prime minister? Will he ever end up serving?
Likely, yes, because now after the budget, that's the agreement.
So you think it will happen? I mean, what most people might
say
be
is for a short period of time, but it will happen.
I mean, the alternative would be for someone to trigger an election before that happens.
Yeah, we have the option of Benny Gantz joining Netanyahu, forming a new government without the election. That's it can happen, but I think it's it's not likely in the near future.
Okay.
We have a military operation, as I said before.
Yes, yes. Inna, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Amichai. I would like to thank you, or I admire your personal integrity, honesty, intellectual honesty, bravery, and lots of various things. And I can see you as a future leader of Israel. I understand you are based in Nazareth Elite or North Galil. Am I correct?
It's the institution that I've formed. It's not me. I live in a kibbutz, not far away, 20 minutes from North Galil, on the lower Galilee, named Kibbutz Hanaton, a very small one. So, yeah.
Could you please tell more about yourself, like your childhood?
My parents made Aliyah from France. My father was, before he grew up in Tunisia. After 6-day war, he moved to France, and then he made Aliyah when he was 19, and my mother later on. And I grew up in Jerusalem mainly, I served in Golani when I was in the army. After around 9 years in the army, I've established an organization named Tavor Leadership Academy to strengthen the Jewish and Zionist identity among secular youth in Israel, which I think is one of the biggest challenges we have. And then I joined Yamin Hadash and later on Yamina, and here I am. And I have 3 kids and a wonderful wife, and that's it.
Okay, Hugh, we'll take your question. Now, just before you do, the people listening on JAir may get cut short a little and go back to station programming, so thank you for joining us. Hugh, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Amichai. What can be done about the illegal Palestinian settlements being built in Area C?
Oh, so you are asking one of the biggest challenges that we're facing today. First, we need to understand it's not exactly the Palestinians. It is the EU with a strategic plan funded with billions and with many other states. Even I've heard about some Japan investment, Finland investment, and they are very decisive to create a Palestinian state on the ground with or without the state of Israel. To do it, they are building rapidly, very rapidly, to create barriers between Jewish villages in Judea and Samaria, and in order to take control over the entire Judea and Samaria region, every place that they can take it. You can see the strategy when they are building. They're not building new neighborhoods very close to the village. They will take it 4 or 5 miles away from the existing village to build a new neighborhood. And these neighborhoods are huge neighborhoods. They are biggest than any small settlement, Jewish settlement, and they have endless money to do it. And unfortunately, the former government and the current government, they are both asleep. They're not awake. They don't understand what's happening on the ground. They are very busy with many other issues, and the price will be heavy.
We are coming up to time. Amichai, those of us here in the diaspora, we all want to see a stable, long-term right-wing government in Israel. Can you see that happening any time in the near future?
It will happen. I think that there is a sense of awakeness within the Zionist forces and the right-wing parties in Israel. People understand, and mostly those 300,000 people who stayed on their couches on the election day, they understand very well what is the meaning of being inactive, and we see major demonstration, quiet legal demonstration against the government, and we can see more and more people who are taking action, civil action, democratic action, and I am optimistic, and I think being optimistic is part of being Jew, and we have no option to surrender or to there's no Yeush. I'm sure we will have a strong Zionist government in the near future.
Well, amen to that, and I think we do need to finish. And I'm sure that you've, if we could vote in Australia, Amichai, I think you'd have a lot of votes from
Thanks
us.
so much, Alan.
Thanks
so much. Really. Thank you, everyone.
I'm sure I speak for our entire audience in congratulating you for standing strongly for your principles and values. We wish more politicians, both in Israel and the Western world and here in Australia, had had your moral courage. So yasher koach to you. And we at the AJA are very happy to support you in whatever way we can. Just before we go, tell us your Tavor Academy. If people want to see more about that, what can they do?
So I can send you first. There's a website, so you can see what's exactly it's all about. In 2 words, there's a lot of activities going on with high school students, pre-military leadership programs. We have 2 of them. Service year, which is slightly different, but also one of these gap year program. We are working with the army. We are working with the officers, not just in the army, but also in other organizations. All we are trying to do is to strengthen the Jewish and Zionist core ideology, not from a religious perspective, but from a simple Jewish perspective and Zionist perspective. So that's basically what we're doing, and I can send you the
the link
details
will be
of
what? Tavor, T-A-V-O-R?
T-A-V-O-R Leadership Academy, Tavor Leadership Academy. Yeah.
Okay, and who funds this? Is this from benefactors?
No, I founded it was 13 or 12 years ago, and now it is run by Amit Deri, who is a very he's a great guy and is a very great Zionist, also a former officer, and he's also established another organization, Reservist on Duty, fighting the BDS. So he's the one that runs Tavor at the moment. That's it.
And if people want to donate, they can donate to your organization?
It's not mine. I'm not in the board even now. So it's Am Israel organization.
Okay.
And I can send you the details of Amit, and you can speak with him. And
okay. All right. Thank you. Well, on that note, look, thank you again, Amichai. Just before we go, if anybody wants to listen to some more Jewish-themed radio, they can listen to the L'Chaim program with Morris Klein. That's on 3ZZZ right now, FM 92.3 or 3ZZZ.com.au. That's all we have for tonight. Join us again next week for Gerald Steinberg of NGO Monitor, when we will expose the hypocrisy of the many NGOs around the world. Don't forget, you can keep up to date with what the AJA is talking about on our Facebook page. Please like and share it widely. But for now, we'll say lehitraot to you, Amichai. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks so much, Alan. And
okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, and for now, we wish you all a very good night. Bye for now.